Hello and welcome to Lost Love Chronicles.
My fiancée laughed. A prenup? I'd sooner die than sign that. I nodded slowly, gave her a polite smile, and replied, I respect your conviction. Then I calmly took out my phone, dialed our wedding planner, and said, Hi, Mandy. Cancel everything. Yes, the whole thing. Tell the guests there's been a tragedy. An unforeseen one. Catherine blinked. Wait, what? I hit send on the mass message. 300 guests. Boom. Phones lit up across 3 time zones. The message read, Due to an unforeseen tragedy, the wedding of Catherine and Daniel has been canceled. We appreciate your understanding. I glanced at Catherine. Well, I said, you did say you'd rather die. Cut to 2 hours later. We sat in our lawyer's office, a room heavy with the scent of old money and the slow decay of genuine civility. The leather chairs groaned when we sat, like they were quietly judging our worth. The air was too clean. There was bottled water on the table, and the brand had a mountain on it. That kind of office. Mr. Derrick, our lawyer, was the sort of man who probably shaves with a ruler. Not a wrinkle in sight. On his shirt, his face looked like it had been forged from wax that someone forgot to finish sculpting. He shuffled a few papers and began explaining the prenup in that monotone voice only lawyers and GPS systems can pull off without being tackled. Standard terms, he said. All premarital assets remain the property of the individual who brought them into the marriage. That includes Mr. Kindle's business, real estate holdings, and investments. I nodded. It was fair. More than fair. I built my construction company from a pickup truck and a dream. I've got the rust stains on my old driveway to prove it. Now I employ 50 people and own more square footage than my hometown's entire school district. The prenup wasn't a wall, it was a gate. Everything we built together after marriage. Fair game. Split 50-50 if things go belly up. Simple. Logical. Adult. I looked at Catherine, expecting a quiet nod and a pen to paper. Instead, she laughed. Not a cute, light chuckle. No, this was full-tilt Broadway villainous laughter. Like she had just caught the hero monologuing before pressing the red button. A prenup? She said, turning to Mr. Derrick as if he had just suggested she marry me while skydiving into a volcano. Are you serious? Then she swiveled her entire body to face me, and I swear I saw thunderclouds in her pupils. Are you serious, Daniel? She said, with the sort of dramatic flair that suggested I'd just proposed we raise our future children in a shipping container. You want me to sign a piece of paper that says you don't trust me? That says your money is more important than our love. I kept my voice calm. The kind of calm that makes TSA agents nervous. It's not about trust, Kathy, I said, folding my hands in front of me like I was about to explain algebra to a golden retriever. It's about practicality. It's about protecting the business that provides the very life we're planning to build together. I gestured toward the document. It's just a piece of paper. No, it's not, she snapped, eyes wide with theatrical fire. Her voice was rising like a stage soprano hitting her big solo. It's a disgusting, insulting document, and I would sooner die than sign something like that. I mean it. I would literally rather be dead. She stood up so fast the chair squealed against the polished floor like it too had been offended. I looked at her. She was trembling with righteous indignation, the kind of indignation normally reserved for overpriced wine lists or lukewarm cappuccinos. She expected me to fold. That was her go-to move. Cue the drama, add a few moist, camera-ready tears, and boom, Daniel caves. Insert Visa card. Buy purse. Conflict resolved. Not this time. She had fundamentally misjudged the situation. More importantly, she had fundamentally misjudged me. I looked at her. This beautiful, furious, emotionally weaponized woman I had planned to spend the rest of my life with. And in that moment, I saw something. Not love. Not hurt. Not even betrayal. No, I saw strategy. I saw her staring down that prenup like it was the final boss between her and a very comfortable early retirement. Her words weren't about love. They were about leverage. About payout. About Plan A falling apart in real time. She had just laid down all her cards, and they were dollar signs wearing lipstick. So I stood up too, matched her energy, made my face the picture of zen-like understanding. Inside, I was laughing so hard I could barely keep my spine straight. Okay, Catherine, I said, voice soft and even, like I was offering her a warm mug of chamomile tea and not a live grenade. I respect your conviction. The fight drained out of her like air from a leaky pool toy. She blinked. She actually blinked, like a confused Roomba bumping into a wall. A slow smile crept across her face, the kind of smile you'd expect from someone who just sweet-talked a judge out of a parking ticket. Thank you, Daniel, she said, voice like melted butter. I knew you'd understand. I do, I replied. I understand perfectly. She tossed her hair, scooped up her purse like it owed her money, and sailed out of the office with the grace of a soap opera exit. She said she needed to go for a drive to cool off. I didn't say anything. I just watched the door close behind her. Mr. Derrick, still seated like a very expensive gargoyle, looked at me slowly over the top of his glasses. One brow raised, a slight tilt of the head. Well, he said quietly, that was illuminating. Yes, it was, I replied. I sat back down in the chair across from Mr. Derrick, leaned back, and exhaled like a man ready to discuss funeral arrangements for a woman who was still very much alive. Now, I said, clasping my hands, let's talk about how I can best protect my assets during a wedding cancellation. He nodded without a word. The man didn't blink. Honestly, I think he enjoyed this. Catherine, meanwhile, thought she had just won the war over one little piece of paper. She strutted out of that office like Caesar returning from Gaul, completely unaware she had just delivered the perfect verbal nuke, and I was more than happy to detonate it. You see, she said she'd rather die than sign the prenup. Well, don't tempt a man with dramatic precision if you can't handle the follow-through. The following week was surreal. Catherine was radiant, glowing, sweet as syrup and twice as sticky. She kissed me on the cheek like a doting sitcom wife. She made lattes, for God's sake. Lattes. The whole week she floated around, victorious and smug, as if she'd defeated capitalism with nothing but volume and eyeliner. Every conversation returned to the wedding. Our 300-guest, six-figure spectacle of tool and trauma at some overpriced historic hotel. I was paying for all of it, of course. Catherine was in charge of the planning, an arrangement she approached with the solemn responsibility of a world leader managing an international summit. If the summit had a flower wall and a monogrammed ice sculpture. She didn't know it, but she was planning her own social funeral. Guest list and all. Her melodramatic declaration in the lawyer's office had been the best gift I've ever received. Tacky. Yes. Unhinged. Certainly. But above all, it was binding. She'd rather die than sign the prenup? Done. I would now treat that as a sincere, legal, and very literal choice. My first call was to Becky, our wedding planner. Becky is a machine disguised as a woman, efficient, stylish, and always on the verge of a controlled emotional breakdown. I scheduled a face-to-face. When I walked into her office, I had prepared for the performance of a lifetime. My face was a masterclass in subtle grief. Tight jaw, slightly glazed eyes, a sigh that carried the weight of a man who had just seen his future collapse in slow motion. Becky, I began, voice low, every syllable soaked in somber dread. I have some terrible news. Her face went full grayscale. Oh my God, Daniel. What is it? Is everything okay? I took a breath. Shaky. Believable. Oscar-worthy. It's Catherine, I whispered. Her hands flew to her mouth. Gone. What do you mean gone? Like she left you. I looked her dead in the eye, gave her my best brooding stare, the kind that makes people offer casseroles and unsolicited hugs. Becky, I said, letting my voice tremble, just slightly, just enough. She's gone. I let the ambiguity hang in the air, thick, syrupy, and dripping with implication. Like the pause between a priest saying he's in a better place and everyone realizing someone just died. I didn't have to lie. That's the beautiful part. I just had to let Becky's imagination do what it does best, spiral wildly in the direction of Hallmark tragedy. Oh, you poor man, she said, her professional wedding planner mask crumbling into something far more raw. Oh, Daniel, I am so sorry. What can I do? We need to cancel everything. Yes, I said, nodding gravely, like a man who had just buried both a fiancé and a golden retriever in one weekend. The wedding is off. I need you to contact all the vendors immediately. The hotel, the caterer, the florist, the band, all of them. Of course, she murmured, already clawing at a notepad like a wartime nurse taking tria. There's one more thing, I added, reaching into my jacket pocket with slow, funereal drama. The cancellation notices. They need to go out to all 300 guests. I placed the printed sheet gently in front of her, like it was a death certificate. Becky leaned forward and read it aloud, her voice barely audible. Due to an unforeseen and tragic event, the wedding of Catherine Andrews and Daniel Miller will not be taking place. We thank you for your love and support during this incredibly difficult time. The Miller and Andrews families ask for privacy as they navigate this untimely demise. Her eyes welled up. Untimely demise, she breathed. Oh, that's just heartbreaking. I nodded with the weight of a man who had just lost a future and 15 grand in catering deposits. Thank you, Becky. I need every single guest to receive that by email and a follow-up text by end of day. Of course, Daniel, she said, her voice trembling like she was personally grieving Catherine's sudden plunge into the afterlife. I'll handle it personally. I thanked her, paid her generously for the trauma, and walked out of her office like a man headed to his next chess move. Phase 1, complete. Now, I just needed to clear the board. Fortunately, Catherine's schedule was as predictable as her sense of entitlement. She was spending the next 2 days with her mother and sister, final dress fitting, and a spa day combo extravaganza. It was the perfect opportunity. While she was getting exfoliated and emotionally validated, I was executing a full-scale logistical demolition. I hired a moving company. Not the kind with 2 guys, a rented truck, and a prayer. No, I hired a professional white glove service. I instructed the moving company to arrive at my house, the one Catherine had graciously moved into a year ago when she brought along exactly 1 scented candle and 3 metric tons of personal items. They were professionals. I pointed to the master bedroom, her beloved shoe tower, her curated bookshelf full of unread novels with gold-embossed titles like Paris in the Moonlight and How to Marry Rich Without Looking Desperate. Everything that's hers, I said. Every sequin, every decorative pillow, every overpriced jar labeled serum. If she bought it, borrowed it, or bedazzled it, it goes. They boxed her clothes with speed. They bubble-wrapped her chair that looked like a giant clamshell and cost more than my first truck. They even packed her Himalayan salt lamp, which had never once cured anything except my patience. I paid them extra for silence and speed. 6 hours later, her entire existence had been surgically removed from my home. Poof, gone. Like a magician's assistant, minus the sparkles and tragic backstory. All of it went into a climate-controlled storage unit, prepaid for 3 months. Just enough time for her to either reclaim her belongings or emotionally detach and start a new life in Bali. The key was labeled with her name and left politely at the front desk, with a sticky note that said best wishes. Next, I called the locksmith. Change every lock, I said. Front, back, side, garage, mailbox. If it opens, lock it. If it doesn't, lock it anyway. That evening, I sat down with my parents. The conversation was delicate, like diffusing a bomb, except the bomb had opinions about dessert forks. I called off the wedding, I said. My mother's face contorted in slow motion. What? What? I explained. I told them about the prenup, the meltdown, the soap opera theatrics. I told them about the plan. My dad blinked once, then let out a low chuckle and shook his head. That's one way to do it. My mother gasped, looked horrified, and then, finally, gave me a slow, reluctant nod. That's the family version of we'll allow it. By the time Catherine was driving back from her spa day, freshly exfoliated, spiritually inflated, and smug as a cat in a birdcage, the digital meteor had already entered Earth's atmosphere. Becky, that magnificent goddess of logistical warfare, had fired the shot heard round the RSVP list. 300 emails, 300 texts, all armed with the same phrasing. Unforeseen and tragic event. Untimely demise. The kind of thing that would make any normal person clutch their pearls and cancel their travel insurance. Meanwhile, I was back in my peacefully silent, now Catherine-free home. I turned off my phone, poured myself a whiskey, neat, and waited for the fallout. Oh, and it was glorious. I didn't get to witness it live, of course. I was busy enjoying the sound of absolutely nothing. But I later pieced the story together through a mix of gossip, voicemails, and barely contained laughter. The first ripple hit her phone while she was still on the freeway. A text from a cousin. Oh my God, Kathy, I just got the email. I am so sorry. What happened? Then another ping. College friend. Kathy, call me right now. I'm praying for you and your family. She was confused at first. Thought maybe it was a prank. Or a typo. I imagine she stared at her phone the way people look at autocorrect fails. Mildly offended, deeply inconvenienced, and certain that someone else was to blame. Then her mother called. I wasn't there, but I've heard the story enough times now to piece it together. Evidently, it was less of a conversation and more of a Banshee-level screamfest. Catherine, her mother shrieked into the phone. Thank God. We thought you were dead. We've been lighting candles and looking at photo albums. By the time Catherine's spa-scrubbed Lexus rolled into the driveway, her phone had entered full thermonuclear meltdown. Dozens of missed calls. Hundreds of texts. All frantic. All confused. Many of them likely featuring the words heartbroken and funeral. She ran up to the front door. Tried her key. Didn't work. Tried again. Still didn't work. Then the pounding began. Screaming my name like I was hiding behind the curtains, giggling with a flashlight. There was no answer. Because there was no need. She was locked out of a house that, quite legally and spiritually, was no longer her home, while her phone practically caught fire from the sheer volume of condolence texts. It was, in a word, biblical. And then, as I knew it would, the confrontation came. The phone buzzed. Unknown number. Probably her mother's. I let it ring a few times. Dramatic timing is important. Then I picked up. Daniel, she screamed. Her voice sounded like it had been run through a blender and set on fire. What did you do? What did you do? I held the phone away from my ear slightly, took a slow sip of whiskey, and replied calmly, "Well, that sounds stressful." "Stressful?" she shrieked again. "You canceled our wedding by telling everyone I died. Are you insane?" I shook my head slowly, like a disappointed professor grading a very dumb essay. "I didn't say you died, Catherine," I said, keeping my tone so even it could have hosted a jazz radio show. "I believe the notice mentioned an unforeseen and tragic event leading to an untimely demise." There was a brief, stunned pause. Static. The sound of her brain buffering. I was referring, I continued, to the untimely demise of our relationship. And the tragic event was your Tony Award-winning performance in Mr. Derrick's office. Silence on her end. The kind of silence where you know someone is blinking so hard they're about to sprain their forehead. "And besides," I added, swirling the ice in my glass, "you're the one who set the terms. You said, and I quote, 'I would sooner die than sign that.' So I simply chose to respect your conviction." I leaned back in my chair, smiled, and said, "You made your choice. You chose death over a fair and reasonable legal agreement. So, I acted accordingly. I canceled the wedding in honor of her deeply held, if slightly dramatic, principles. It seemed only fair." She had declared, with the confidence of a Shakespearean villainess, "A prenup? I'd sooner die than sign that." So I did the only logical thing. Of course, the cancellation email that went out to all 300 guests said, "Wedding postponed due to unforeseen tragedy." Which, I guess, wasn't a total lie. The tragedy was her ego. Her phone lit up like a Christmas tree in Times Square. People were calling, texting, sobbing emojis, candle emojis, praying for you posts. She was practically canonized by brunch. I don't understand," she stammered. "I'm honoring your dying wish," I replied, serenely. "You said you'd rather die than sign a prenup. So, naturally, I considered the wedding a funeral." She sputtered, audibly sputtered, like an old teapot, completely unable to form a coherent sentence. You could see the smoke coming out of her ears as her reality crumbled. She had been so sure of her own power, so confident in her ability to twist the narrative, twist me. She thought I was some spineless puppet she could wrap around her perfectly manicured finger. But she didn't have a contingency plan for someone doing the unthinkable, taking her at her literal, theatrical word. "My things," she finally whispered, with all the gravitas of a ghost in a Victorian novel. "Where are my things?" "Your belongings are safe," I said gently. "They've been professionally packed and moved to a secure storage unit. The unit is paid for the next 3 months. The key is waiting for you at the front desk downstairs. I'll text you the address." The pause that followed was rich, flavorful, a stew of disbelief, rage, and the faint smell of scorched pride. "You can't do this to me," she said finally, her tone more tragic actress than angry ex. The fight had drained out of her. All that remained was hollow defeat. "I didn't do anything to you, Kathy," I said, trying not to smile. "I just listened to you." I could practically hear the monologue forming in her head, the rehearsals she'd been mentally running through since she first threatened to walk. But this wasn't her scene anymore. "You told me exactly who you were and what you valued," I said. "I just decided to believe you." Then I hung up the phone. Just like that. Curtain down. The performance was over. The aftermath? A slow, humiliating unraveling. An accidental comedy tour. She spent the next 2 weeks on a bizarre and deeply embarrassing I'm not dead press junket. She had to personally call or message hundreds of people and explain, one by one, that the wedding was off, not due to tragedy, but due to her own melodramatic commitment to not committing. Imagine explaining to your aunt from Denver that no, you're not deceased, you're just greedy and allergic to contracts. She had to admit to her friends, her family, her parents' friends that she refused to sign a prenup and that her fiancé had called her bluff. Publicly. Brutally. With the flair of someone who'd watched Succession one too many times. The story became a legend in our social circle. It passed from friend to friend, like an ancient fable with Instagram captions. She wasn't the tragic heroine in Chiffon anymore. She was the greedy fiancé who flew too close to the prenup. She lost the wedding. She lost the man she thought she could puppeteer. And most importantly, she lost her carefully curated reputation. All because she couldn't resist a little drama. She had to have her moment. Well, she got it. As for me, I lost a significant amount of money in non-refundable wedding deposits. Thousands gone in the name of cake tastings, chair rentals, and an 11-piece string quartet that never got to play a single note. And you know what? Worth every penny. I consider it the best money I've ever spent. A small price to pay to unmask someone before I accidentally ended up sharing a joint tax return with them. She wanted a fairy tale wedding. And in a way, she got one. It just had a very different moral at the end of the story. The moral was, be careful what you wish for. And be very, very careful what you swear on. Some people might just take you at your word. Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comments section below and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.